Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, the bank that puts you first. They can meet your banking and financing needs for personal, agricultural, business, commercial, mortgages, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Happy Wednesday morning. It's crossover season already as Virginia Tech men's and women's basketball gear up for their season opening doubleheader coming up Monday, November 6th. We got the basketball crew on set. It's episode 325 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. So glad you could join us on this chilly Wednesday, November morning as we record on Wednesday, November 1st, 2023 from our Tech Sideline studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead, leave us a like, a comment, subscribe, and please, if you have the time, refer the show to a friend. Well, let's go ahead and introduce everybody on set. I think this is kind of going to be our look for our basketball crew this upcoming season. To my right, as always, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, managing editor David Cunningham. Producing behind the scenes, Mr. Nick Brown. A guy that's going to hop on in the second half, one of our favorites, Carter Hill, to talk women's basketball in half number 2. And I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Fellas, it's that time of year. It almost feels like with football being so exciting, it crept up on us just a little bit here, but it's basketball season nevertheless.
It's the busiest time of year for sure. Crossover season. Monday is the first games.
Yeah,
right.
Doubleheader.
Man, it really snuck up on it. But yeah, excited about it. Obviously, with the women's team, when you come off a Final Four, you're excited about the next season, especially when you return your best players. And the men's team, some new faces in the front court combined with some old faces in the back court. So excited to get things started.
Yeah, I think both of these teams will have really good seasons again. The women obviously had an historic year. Think about this. So this is going to be my third full-time year with Tech Sideline. First year, Virginia Tech men's basketball wins an ACC championship. Second year, Virginia Tech women's basketball wins an ACC championship and goes to the Final Four.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is football is going to get the rematch for Florida State.
I tell you what, man, it would be my luck. I tell you what, it's been really cool to cover both these teams over the last couple of years. Obviously, I covered both when I was a student. This will be like my 7th year covering the women's program, I think. My 5th or 6th covering the men's program because I started out covering the women when I was a freshman. And it's crazy to see just how much that program has grown. Obviously went from being the ACC cellar dweller to winning the ACC and now being picked first. I'm very excited for basketball season, and obviously, like you said, might creep up on some people. I'll tell you what's not going to creep up on some people. That game next Thursday, November, what?
10th?
9th. Against Iowa and down in Charlotte. Virginia Tech versus Iowa, top 10 matchup, Final Four, teams from last season. Georgia Amore, Caitlin Clark, Elizabeth Kitley. I mean, that game is going to have all the firepower everybody needs. So I'm very excited for college basketball season. It gives us a little bit of a change up from football.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about everything you guys just mentioned, from the roster to the schedules. First, we're going to start with the men's side of things, but I have to tell our audience that Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. But the Tech Sideline podcast is also brought to you by Coldwell Banker Townside Realtors, trusted real estate services for the Roanoke and New River Valleys of Virginia. If you're in the market to purchase or sell a residential property, or if you're looking for land or investment property in Southwest Virginia, we have you covered. 3 offices in the area. Visit cbtownside.com to learn more. A recap of last men's basketball season, very, very briefly. 29-15, 8-12 in conference play. Lost in the second round of the ACC tournament and lost at Cincinnati in the first round of the NIT. So I ask you guys this to start when we talk about the men's side of things. What are fair expectations coming into this campaign?
I'm not sure. I think Virginia Tech is one of those teams, just like the rest of the middle of the pack in the ACC. They're either NCAA tournament or NIT, and it's going to come down to how they close out games, whether they have key injuries at certain positions. And, I think last year's team was an NCAA tournament team, but they missed Rodney Rice for almost the whole season, and they missed Hunter Couture for a 4-game stretch, and they lost all 4 of those games. But that's how close things are. It's very, very close between success and failure. Not that NIT per se is failure. When you go 19-15, that's not a bad season per se, especially when you think about the history of Virginia Tech basketball. But I want to be there or thereabouts on Selection Sunday. That's what I think. That's a fair expectation. But what separates an NCAA tournament team and an NIT team is very fine margins. And I think this team is good enough to go to the NCAA tournament, but to get there, they have to be good at the fine margins.
I think it's interesting. You look at last season, 2022 season, when Tech won the ACC championship. Tech had 13 losses that year. Tech had 15 last year. Very, very fine margins. 19 wins versus 23 wins.
And by the way, I have to correct myself. I accidentally said 29. It is 19. As I was reading it, I was like, that's a typo.
We know what you meant.
Yes.
Yeah. That's like, you change 3 or 4 games and you're probably in the tournament. And again, it all comes down to metrics. It all comes down to the net. It all comes down to efficiency. That's something obviously, Chris and I try to keep everybody updated on throughout the year. I think this is an NCAA tournament team. I think, with the exception of Mike Young's first year, every single team he's put out on the floor has been an NCAA tournament team. The question is, can you A, stay healthy? Can you B, not have any other issues? Obviously, Rodney Rice is gone. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit. But better at the beginning of the year than in January. The one thing Chris didn't mention was the whole Darius Maddox thing last year. So you lost a guy who started games, plus another guy who started, plus the guy who's supposed to come in and be absolutely electric for you. You lost all 3 of those guys for certain stretches last year. 2 of those guys for just about the entire year. So Virginia Tech basketball dealt with a lot last year. I think this is a tournament team, and I think Tech should be in good graces come NCAA tournament time. There's a good chance Tech's on the bubble, but I think this team has the talent to go to the NCAA tournament. I think it has a lot of veterans, and I think the biggest difference this year will be defense. Tech was abysmal last year on the defensive end. Mike Young has admitted that. Everybody knows that. And with J.D. Byers, new assistant coach, coming into the fold from VCU, there's been a big uptick, a big emphasis on defense. I think that will pay dividends early.
Well, I ask you this, guys. What does a successful season look like? Whether you want to say NCAA tournament appearance, whether you want to say a certain seed in the ACC tournament, what is the win total for you to sit back and say, okay, that was a win?
I don't know, get around 20. Like I said, whatever puts you around on the bubble for Selection Sunday. No, I'd prefer to go into Selection Sunday, clearly being in the NCAA tournament. But, I think anything like 20-ish wins or so on Selection Sunday would say, okay, yeah, that was a good team. They can make the tournament, or they could have made the tournament, whatever. It's certainly I can't pick an ACC tournament seed because everybody plays an unbalanced schedule.
Right.
I think the conference tournament these days, it's not the same as it used to be because everybody in the ACC used to play the exact same schedule. And it's so difficult with these big conferences to really put too much stock into that. I just want to be in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. Whatever number of wins that is, I don't know. I like going to the NCAA tournament. I didn't like not going last year. I don't expect to go every single year, of course, but I do think last year's would have been an NCAA tournament team. I guess my concern this year is back to the basket scoring in the front court. And, where do your points come from there? I think there will still be points in the front court, and I think Lynn Kidd's a good back to the basket player. But I think losing a guy like Basili. God, where did I pull that from? Yeah, geez, he's been gone for so long.
And Justin Mutz.
Yeah, both those guys. It's just going to be a different look for the team this year.
So let's go there. Let's talk about this roster a little bit. David, what would your starting five, if they were to go out there and play today, which they will in less than a week, what does your starting five look like? And then we can break down some likely lineups as well.
So Virginia Tech, as far as I'm aware, is going to roll with Sean Padula, third year, Hunter Couture, obviously this is his fifth year, MJ Collins, he's a sophomore, and I think he's somebody we'll talk about in a second. He's really impressed so far this preseason. Robbie Barron, the Northwestern transfer, is going to play at the 4. I think at least to start. He'll play some 4 and 5. And then Lynn Kidd will be the 5 to go to start. And I think it was interesting talking to Mike Young down in Charlotte last week at the AC tip-off. He was talking about just all the different possibilities of who he can play at the 4 and the 5 and the different lineups. He said he's not going to start Mekhi Long, the Old Dominion transfer, and Robbie Barron at the same time, but they will play together. So there's going to be a lot of I think you'll see a lot of different lineup combinations in the front court.
Yeah, and I think that's probably been a big part of their 2 preseason scrimmages is probably figuring out amongst the new guys who plays well together. I like the idea of Lynn Kidd at the 5 and Barron at the 4. It would, like, back to the basket scoring would concern me if, like, Barron was at the 5 and Mekhi Long was at the 4, or even Tyler Nickel was at the 4. Like, that's just a bunch of shooters on the court. Is there anybody you can throw it into the post to in that situation? Probably not. I think that can work well in certain situations. I think that could work well against certain matchups, but I don't know that that's something we're going to see often. And ultimately, Virginia Tech's got a lot of guys that can get minutes at the center position, even if you don't even count Barron. Let's just for the sake of argument, say he's a 4 right now. But you've still got, oh my goodness, let me go down the list here. You still got Lynn Kidd, you got Maligel Petit, and you've got Wessler there also. So that's 3 guys that are natural centers. And you can play Barron there in certain situations depending on matchups. So I think Tech's probably got more depth at the 5 than they ever had this year.
I ask you guys this, and it's something, we have to bring up. There is somebody missing from that list that you thought you were going to have, Rodney Rice. Your thoughts on that whole thing and how that's transpired?
I couldn't take 2 more years of like Rodney Rice and Darius Maddox because I kept calling both Darius Rice. Because when I was in school, Miami had a basketball player named Darius Rice, and he was really, really good. And I think he went to the NBA for a while. So I kept getting them mixed up. But you can't miss something that you never really had. I thought he showed serious flashes for Virginia Tech last year, but it was a struggle for him this offseason. Like we've heard, he had mono and things like that, and.
We didn't hear. He told me he told.
Oh, he told you. There you go. All right. Well, now it's official that he had. Well, I mean, I know.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about Rice is people want to come after Mike Young, and I thought it was very telling when we spoke with Hunter Couture, Sean Padula, and Maligel Petit at the AC tip-off last week. And obviously, I had heard stuff. I had passed it along to Will and Chris, but listening to the players and their reactions. They want what's best for Rodney. And I think at the end of the day, you can't make a player stay if they don't want to be there.
And you shouldn't try.
Yes, especially in the portal era when it hurts that it's this close to before the season. I know people are going to have their questions because I think in a lot of ways it doesn't make sense. But remember that you're dealing with, these players are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. I mean, Gio, in a way, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but this is like all of a sudden if you just decided randomly, hey, I'm going to go do this, right? Like you're 19, 20, 21 years old, but it's your life, right? And you're still trying to figure out what you want to do and where you want to be and who you want to be surrounded by. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like all the players we spoke with, I asked them just kind of casually, what did anything surprise you about it? What did you think? And they were all kind of just like, Padula told me the only thing that surprised him was that it happened. He was kind of caught off guard a little bit by it, but all 3 of them said, we wish Rodney the best. He was a great teammate, a great player. He was great to be around. I hope he goes and, has an awesome career. We enjoyed playing with him. But so I think, I don't want to say too much, but I think No, it came down to he just didn't want to be in Blacksburg anymore. And people can speculate on whether it was playing time or whatnot, but I'll say this, he was not healthy enough to practice in Tech's open practice on October 14th before the Wake Forest game. So there's a possibility that that played a factor in it.
He had not been cleared for physical contact, basically.
Yeah, and we talked about this. I've never had mono. You said you know somebody who has had mono.
Yeah,
I don't.
I have, and it was. I remember when I was in high school, he missed the entire second half of the football season. Not cleared for contact. So we have no idea when Rodney Rice was going to be cleared. Yeah. We don't know when he would have been available to play for Virginia Tech this year. Maybe he's available in December, in which case, well, you missed the whole offseason, or not the whole offseason, but the whole preseason and some of the offseason. And it's kind of last year all over again, right? And I don't know. For whatever reason, the stars just didn't align there. And I'll say this. Whenever you recruit a top 50, top 60 player from D.C., you're not just recruiting that player. You're recruiting all the hangers-on, all the advisors and things like that. There's a lot of people in Rodney Rice's ear telling him what they think he should do.
I think I don't think that's something Virginia Tech's really used to. I think that's something that, Tech doesn't usually get a lot of kids with, if you want to say, handlers, right? Like with big support systems like that. Not that they don't have kids with support systems, but I think when you bring a top 100 kid in, I think a lot of times the aspirations are NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they all think they're going to go to the NBA, even though hardly anybody goes to the NBA.
So I think, I think the biggest thing is look back. The last time we saw him publicly, he was not practicing in his scrimmage. Take that for what it's worth, and take the comments for, take what Mike Young said and take what the players said. I mean, again, they wish him all the best, so there's no bad blood there. I think that's all the fans really need to know.
And I want us to just close with one thing. I don't think it has anything to do with Mike Jones.
Okay.
I know Mike Jones recruited him, and he's a former DeMatha head coach and all that. If it was because of Mike Jones, and Rodney Rice would have transferred in April when Mike Jones left. And I don't think there's any thing going on as far as Mike Jones trying to convince him to transfer to Maryland or anything like that. That might eventually be where he ends up, but if it had anything to do with Mike Jones leaving, then Rodney Rice would have left back in April.
One door closes, another one opens. So what does this mean for the playing time of the freshmen? What can we expect out of Rex Steiner and Jaden Young?
I'm excited to see him. I've heard good things about both of them. Rex Steiner was probably the person that impressed me the most at that open practice. He's very, very composed. I know you're just hoping to see his dad.
I want to meet his dad at a basketball game. Yep.
Big Papa Pump.
Yep.
No, I think Rex Steiner will play a lot. Now, I think it'll kind of be a similar balance, maybe a little bit to Storm Murphy, Sean Padula a couple years ago. How do you balance that? I think at times Padula was a little bit more efficient, and I think that was kind of that was the end of Murphy's career, the beginning of Padula's, and you saw the explosiveness, the highlights. I don't know if it'll be as much of Mike Young can take Padula off the floor, but he played Padula way too much last year, and he sat in this chair and admitted that. I think Rex Steiner will play a big role. Maybe you even see Padula and Rex Steiner on the floor at the same time, but he gives, especially with the departure of Rice, he's going to be the secondary ball handler, and that's a positive. And I think in a pinch, he can step in and play. I don't expect him to play more than 10-ish minutes a game, but he's going to have a big role this year. And I'm excited to see Jaden Young. Mike Young's talked about his background at Greensboro, Greensboro Day School. I've heard very positive things about him. At the 2 and the 3, at those spots, it's kind of a little bit clogged up. So I'm not sure how much he's going to be able to play. But if he does, I would expect good things from him.
I think Tuck will be fine on the wing. I think maybe the biggest knockdown effect of Rice leaving is what does that do to Padula's minutes and the backup point guard minutes. So if Rex Steiner can handle it, great, but what if he can't handle it? Does that mean you have to Sean Padula's back to playing 38 minutes a game like last year? Yeah. Or does that mean Hunter Couture is now your backup point guard again, which they do not want to do? They want to play him exclusively on the wing. That's the biggest knockdown effect. I think you'll see Rex Steiner settle in and play probably like you said, about 10 minutes a game, and it'll vary.
Obviously.
And obviously players especially freshmen, they change during the course of the season. You look at Padula as a freshman. He was a much better player at the end of the season than he was at the beginning of the season. And, you would think the same thing would happen with Rechsteiner. I don't know as much about Young, but I know that Mike Young knows his high school coach very well and things like that. So he's very well scouted by Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech had the total scoop on him when he signed. And, when you lose a guy like Rice, who's capable of playing all three positions in the backcourt, that means there's 30 minutes of playing time available for all these guys to fight over. And we'll just have to see how it works out. And, you can throw Tyler Nickel in there at the 3 to a certain
John
extent.
Camden.
Right. Are they going to be a 3 or a 4? Well, they're going to have to guard threes because of the way Virginia Tech switches on defense. But, like I said, it's 30 minutes that have been vacated, and it's up to those guys to fight it out.
Well, that was my follow-up question. Where do John Camden and Pat Wessler fit into this equation, especially since you went out in the portal and you got some 4s and a guy in Barron that can play some 5 as well?
I think John Camden will have an interesting role this year. He's one of the guys, kind of like MJ Collins. Like MJ Collins will start. Melagel Poteet and Lynn Kidd, like Camden's kind of, in my vision, kind of on his own island a little bit, because he's a guy who was here last year and he played at times because he was needed. What kind of jump did he take this offseason? I'm very curious to see if he plays, how much he plays on Monday night against Coppin State. I think he could. He's kind of in that same little niche role as Tyler Nichols, so I'm interested to see how that battle goes. But I think Camden is somebody that, if his defense has improved and he becomes more confident as a 3-point shooter, he could kind of help this team. And then I think you look at Wessler. I'm not sure how much he's going to play this year, but I think he'll play some. And I think, unlike Poteet and Kidd, he's more of a shooter. They're more, Poteet's more brute force, and Kidd's more, back to the basket, little floaters and hook shots. Wessler's more of a pop out and shoot it. I've heard positive things about how he's gotten his body right in the offseason. I'm very interested to see how big his role is behind those two guys.
I think kind of Camden and Tyler Nickel, they seem like they're fighting for the same minutes, don't they? You could technically play one at the 3 and one at the 4, but I don't know that that's ideal. Maybe if you want to put your best shooting lineup out there, you could roll with something like that at times. But I don't think it's ideal overall. Wessler's probably still a year away, though. I will say, unprompted, sitting in that chair, Mike Young brought up Patrick Wessler. So which leads me to believe that he's made more progress behind the scenes than people realize. Like, you hear things about how when he enrolled, he could barely do a push-up and things like that.
Yeah, Kevin Giltner said that.
Right, okay, he said that, so I'm not making that up.
No.
It is in my head for a reason.
That was Tech assistant coach last year or over the summer on a podcast or something like that.
Okay, right. So I think he's skilled, and he can, I think he's the ideal center for Mike Young. Just somebody who's skilled. And when they had an open practice last year, I wasn't able to attend the one this year, but last year, that's the thing I noticed. He was out there popping threes and things like that. But, Mike Young's not going to recruit very many guys who aren't skilled when it comes down to it. But I think Wessler's a guy who's probably still a year away. I mean, you've got Melagel Poteet, who's a senior. You've got Robbie Barron, who can play the 5. He's in his last year. Lynn Kidd's a senior. Now, 2 of those guys could use their COVID year and come back, but you got to figure at least one of those other 3 guys who can play the 5 are going to be gone. So I think when he's a redshirt sophomore, that's when he'll really become part of the rotation for the first time. I think he's going to be one of those guys who develops slowly over the course of his career as he continues to add strength and like his skill set kind of catches up to his body, so to speak. Sometimes it takes those big guys a while to learn how to be fluid. It's just they grow so fast. Like a lot of
he's a 7-footer.
I would be interested to know like when he started getting tall, because some of these 7-footers you hear stories about. Oh well, when he was 14 or 15, he was 6'3" and playing shooting guard, and just like that, he was 6'10", and he had to switch to the post and learn post moves, and you grow so fast that you don't really know your own body and things like that. So that's why it can take some big men a while to develop, and I think Wessler could be one of those guys who really could shine later in his career at Tech.
How many minutes can we expect out of Tyler Nickel? I thought coming in, maybe some people thought he had a chance to start. He seems to be a prolific scorer. What can we expect to see out of him minutes-wise?
I think my biggest thing for him is his defense, because we know he can score it. I was told he played very well in both scrimmages. I know he played very well in Greece. Sorry, not in Greece. In Italy and Switzerland when Tech went over and did that European excursion. That was publicized. I know he did well.
He dropped like 20 in one of those games.
Yeah, he hit like 5 threes once or twice. I mean, he's a shooter. He's a pure shooter. VHSL's all-time leading scorer. This kid is good. His defense, I'm very interested to see it. I think he can play. I think he'll play probably 20 minutes a game, 15, 20 minutes a game, at least to start. I think it might take, again, like those first couple games, it might take Mike Young a little bit of time to just figure out where he likes a guy here versus where he likes a guy there, and I don't know. I don't know who he wants. Like Nickel's defense will dictate, I think, where he plays, if it's a 3 or the 4, and who plays around him. Yeah. But I think he's going to have a role. I'm very curious to see how big that role is and how much he plays, because Tech's going to need him this year. Tech's going to need him to come on and score in bunches. He's not going to start, at least to start the season, but he can be a big, big help for Virginia Tech this season if his defense comes along to where it should be.
I think he'll be fine guarding 4s. You don't know if when he faces up against like a really athletic 3. Mike Young always says, when people ask him what position does this guy play, and he's like, you are who you can guard. So
he does say that a lot.
He does. So is he a 4 or a 3? Well, I asked Mike Young that question when he was on the podcast, and he said, well, he's going to have to be a 3. And it doesn't necessarily mean he'll be playing the 3 a whole lot, although he will play it some. What he means by that probably is, the way Tech switches on defense is he's going to come face-to-face with a lot of 3s on those switches, even when he's playing the 4, and he's going to have to be able to guard him. So, yeah, ultimately, Tech does have other options there. Obviously, Robbie Barron's going to start there, and then you've got Mekhi Long who can play there if you want to go, with a smaller lineup. So, Tech, and obviously John Camden as well. So it's one of those things where, like, if he's struggling on defense, then Mike Young does not have to play him major minutes right away, because you've got John Camden who can pretty much fill the exact same role.
And Mekhi Long.
Right.
I think I know. I'm sure we'll talk about Mekhi Long in a sec, Gio.
Yep.
I'm just gonna go with it and lead into that conversation
for the sake of time. Run with it.
Yeah. Well, so I think Mekhi. The thing about Mekhi Long is he's very Justin Mutz-esque, kind of similar. I don't want to say similar build, but similar attributes in terms of he rebounds the heck out of the ball. I would expect him to average like 7 or 8 rebounds per game at least. He is a ball hawk when it comes to rebounding, and he's a very good defender. His scoring, I'm not sure where he's most comfortable scoring, because he scored the ball well at Old Dominion, but he didn't need to. That wasn't his strength. His strength was crashing the glass and playing good defense. He's going to have a big role this year. Again, I don't expect him to start, but he will play a whole lot of minutes, and he's a veteran guy that I think will really, really help this team. How much he plays kind of depends on how Mike Young wants to kind of plug and play with everybody else around him. So you see a theme here. Mike Young has a lot of options this year.
Yeah.
This is not like
you said it's his deepest team.
Yeah, this is not like the past couple years where I think back to that 2022 team where it was, okay, Storm Murphy's going to play this, Hunter Couture's going to play this, Naheem Aline's going to play this.
Pretty straightforward.
Justin Mutz, Keve Aluma, you're going to plug David Gasson in for one of those guys, and you're going to plug Sean Padula in. And Darius Maddox will come in. That's not this year's team. This year's team is, you might see some guys playing the 3 or the 4, some guys playing the 4 or the 5, some guys playing the 1 or the 2. It's going to be interesting watching all of the different lineups Mike Young plays.
Yeah, versatility, which is always good if you figure out everybody's roles early. If it takes you too long to figure it out, you might get off to a bad start and things like that. That's what Tech is hoping to avoid this year. I think Mekhi Long, you could see him at the 4 or the 3. I thought it was interesting when in the first scrimmage, he seemed to pretty much play all his minutes at the 4. I don't know if that was just a one-time thing with Mike Young was just testing some things out or not. I think pound for pound or inch for inch in this case, he's probably Tech's best rebounder. Whether he plays enough minutes to lead the team in rebounding at the end of the year, I don't know. But like a rebounds per minute basis, I bet, or minutes per rebound basis, I would guess he'll be at the top of the team at the end of the year.
Fair assumption there. Last personnel question for you guys. MJ Collins, what is a fair assessment of the jump he could take from year 1 to year 2? Where are the expectations for MJ? Sounds like he's going to play some 3 going into this season.
He sat in this chair on the Triumph Spotlight a couple days ago. I believe it's coming out today, so go listen to that when it comes out. I'm very impressed by him. 1, in his demeanor, but 2, how much he's grown. He was thrown to the fire last year. He had to play minutes last year because Tech had nobody else, like we already mentioned, and he played. Sometimes not great, sometimes very great. I think back to that dunk he had against North Carolina, and I think back to that game-winning shot he had against Duke.
I was going to say, how about that Duke game?
And then he kind of punched Kyle Filipowski a little bit. He had a little bit of a great moment and then a not-so-great moment, and he kind of got away with it. I think he's going to have a big role this year. He's going to start, and I think his three-point shooting has got a lot better, and his defense. Mike Young has challenged him to, I want you to be able to take some stuff off Hunter Couture's plate and guard the other team's best guard. That is a big challenge, and he has taken to it. Hunter Couture told me last week that he's made MJ guard him every day in practice, and he's guarded MJ. And I think that's good to see because I think MJ Collins is kind of that future of the backcourt. He and Sean Padula will be a senior next year, and then Collins will be a junior. So Collins is kind of the future in that spot, especially once Couture leaves. He's got a bright future. He's going to do wonders. I think everybody will be very, very impressed by how much he has grown this year. Last year, there were guys that were, teams that were leaving him open because he wasn't that consistent from 3. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be able to leave him open this year.
I thought he showed a lot of toughness last year, playing with broken nose, busted lip, teeth sticking into his gum, and I think it's really hard to shoot consistently when you're wearing a mask like that. And you'd see he'd take it off every time out. He couldn't stand wearing it, and I think that led to part of his shooting inconsistencies. That and you're just adjusting to the speed of the game in college. But he definitely showed his toughness, and that's step 1. I think he showed his maturity level and his toughness. So I think he's going to be a good player for Virginia Tech. You like to see his jump shot come along this year. Defensively, yeah, if he can develop and be a really good defender, Tech has been at its best when they've had 2 really good perimeter defenders. I mean, Mike Young's best defensive team 2 years ago was Hunter Couture and Naheem Aline, both really outstanding perimeter defenders. And this past year, when Hunter Couture went down for those 4 games, they didn't have any good perimeter defenders really. And when Couture was healthy, they only had 1. And then Padula had to play too many minutes to begin with. So their defense was all messed up last year. But if Collins stays healthy and Couture stays healthy, I think they're going to be a much better defensive team on the perimeter this season.
All right. Well, we're running a little bit long here, so we're going to kind of keep this next section just a little bit shorter here. Chris, I know you got a lot of work to do, as all of us do. We want to get Carter on to talk about the women's side of things as well, but we must talk about this schedule a little bit. First and foremost, I want to get your guys' thoughts on the non-conference portion of the schedule. You do have a Thanksgiving tournament in there that's going to be down in Orlando. You play South Carolina, one of the bigger names in the non-con. Auburn is your draw in the ACC SEC Challenge. You also have some cupcakes, so to speak, to start. Just in general, what are your thoughts on the non-con portion?
I think playing South Carolina on a neutral court in Charlotte, where there should be plenty of Tech fans and South Carolina fans, if they're actually interested in men's basketball, should be good. Auburn would be tough on the road, but you want to have a tough road game. It's not going to hurt you, and if you happen to win it, it's going to help you a lot. It's not the most difficult non-conference schedule, but at the same time, with the right draws down in Charleston, Orlando. Charleston was last year. There's some games down there that could prove to be beneficial to Virginia Tech, and obviously everybody wants the Virginia Tech versus Buzz Williams matchup. It could happen.
Yeah,
that would be sweet.
Yeah, My quick thought on the non-conference schedule is I think it'll play to Tech's strengths a little bit. The big thing is that 3-game stretch down in Orlando. Those are your biggest challenges. You got a Final Four team in Florida Atlantic that's down there. That's on the other side of the bracket. Iowa State and VCU are both good. I mean, there are 8 teams in that tournament, and 6 of them went to the NCAA tournament last year. The only 2 that didn't are Virginia Tech and Butler. So
yeah, those are two really good non-NCAA tournament programs, if you think about it.
Yeah. So everybody else, Tech starts out with Boise State, who went to the tournament last year. Robbie Barron and Northwestern beat them. This is going to be a really good challenge. I think it'll set Tech up well. December 3rd is Tech's first ACC game against Louisville, which I think is a good ACC game to get started with, especially considering Louisville lost to a D2 opponent this week.
Wow.
I don't know if you saw that.
That makes me so sad.
How about any tough stretches that you see on the schedule once you do get to ACC play where it's like, geez, you got to go play, 2 tough opponents on the road and then your 1 home games against one of the juggernauts, or anything specific jump out to you, or do you like how the conference schedule shapes up?
Chris does not have the schedule in front of him, and it's been a while since I.
Sorry, Chris. No.
It's been a while since I've looked at.
I should have printed it off.
It's been a while since I've looked at the schedule. I'm trying to remember what I wrote. I think that beginning, Tech has Miami and UVA back-to-back in January. I think the beginning shapes up well. Louisville, Wake Forest, Florida State, Clemson. Clemson was good last year. I expect Clemson to be good, but that's 3 games at the beginning of the year that are not too bad. You look at the end of the year. You end on Pitt, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Louisville, Notre Dame.
Very doable.
Good 5 games to end it on. The middle of the schedule is where you're going to make and break. I especially look at that stretch with Duke, Miami, Notre Dame, Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia. Notre Dame and Florida State are not who they used to be. North Carolina, Virginia, Miami, and Duke, though, that's a 4 tough games in a 6-game stretch.
I think Tech will do fine at home. If you want to make the NCAA tournament, you've got to steal a few road wins in there, right? So you look here and you're at Wake Forest on December 30th, and then a week later, January 6th, you're at Florida State. Those are 2 winnable road games. Virginia, it's always tough to win up there. NC State on January 20th, you've got Notre Dame in there. How are the Irish going to be this year with a new coach?
Probably. I mean, I picked them 15th. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I also picked Louisville 14th. I probably should have picked Louisville 15th because I thought Louisville would be better.
I think you're splitting hairs.
Yeah. But Tech goes on the road to Notre Dame and to Louisville at the end of the year.
So to me, it's more about how many of those road games do you win? And I would really like to see Tech win one of those first 2 road games because I think they're winnable, and you don't expect to win all your road games. You don't even expect to win all your winnable road games, but you've got to have about 3 or so in there, I would think, and it'll be interesting to see where those come from.
David, how good is the ACC as a whole this year? If you had to pick a number, how many ACC teams are going dancing in the NCAA tournament?
Man,
because it seems like last year was a little down
4.
for the conference.
Yeah, I tell you what, Duke is going to be very good. Duke is going to. I know people will be like, "Oh, yeah, Duke's always good." No, Duke returns 4 starters and has 4 top 20, 4 5-star kids coming in,
which never happens for them to return.
That's
guys
rare.
Like that.
They need to take advantage of it.
Duke, this is like a potential national championship winning team, I think, for Duke. I'm interested to see North Carolina. I think North Carolina can be hit or miss. North Carolina is either going to be really good or really bad.
Kind of in the heels.
Kind of like last year. UVA, expect UVA to be good. Expect Miami to be good. Miami has Nigel Pack back. Isaiah Wong's finally gone, so you can breathe a sigh of relief there. Norchad Omier is back. I expect Clemson. I think Clemson will be interesting. They got your boy Joe Girard there now.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right.
And how is he going to adjust to playing man to man? PJ Hall is there. I think Clemson will be good. I think I want to say 6 teams make the NCAA tournament. I think that's good, but I could also see 5. I think Tech will be right there on that edge. I think Wake Forest, Pitt, NC State are 3 teams that are kind of knocking on the door a little bit that have the opportunity to get in. And Syracuse, if they make a magical run.
With former Virginia Tech assistant coach Adrian Autry as their new
I tell you what, Judah Mintz, he's somebody at Syracuse I'm watching, and they got J.J. Starling from Notre Dame. So that's a really, really good combination.
And they just got that 7'4" guy from Florida State.
Yes.
Which one? Florida State has a million 7'4" guys.
I forget his name.
The assessment is that this is like the best roster Syracuse has had in like 15 years. So I
don't know
we'll
about
see what
15.
They do. We'll see what they do.
Because they've gone. I mean, they went. Whatever.
They went to the Final Four as a 10 seed, though.
Yeah. Anyway, I expect the ACC to be better. A lot of intra-conference transfers, so that'll be interesting to keep up with.
It's juicy.
Like Matthew Cleveland went from Florida State to Miami.
Insane.
So stuff like that.
That's actually, he was good too last year in the ACC tournament. The first round until did they end up losing that game to Georgia Tech? Does anyone remember?
I don't
They
remember.
did, but he had like 30 something points in that first. The only reason I remember is because I called that game, but he kind of went off there. Last and not least, and certainly not least, before we let Chris get out of here, let's get a prediction. What do you think this team does? Give us like. Do they go to the NCAA tournament? What round do they lose in? Type of thing.
Yeah. When it comes down to it, when you lose Rodney Rice, you lose a very talented player. Even though I said earlier you can't miss what you never really had, but everybody was counting on him being a starter this year, and you thought that would improve Virginia Tech's overall talent level. There's 2 ways to kind of look at the Mike Young tenure so far. Is okay, he's made 2 NCAA tournaments. Great job, you know. But at the same time, we're 1 4-game stretch away from being in the NIT back-to-back years, and nobody's not as many people are as excited about the program as they are, right? It's 1 tournament run. So what is Virginia Tech basketball under Mike Young? I think in the other year they made the NCAA tournament was a COVID year, and you just don't know how that goes with everybody playing different numbers of games.
22 games total.
Exactly. You know, so there's just still unknown there. It just seems like Virginia Tech is a fringe. They're a bubble team under Mike Young, and they've been on the right side of the bubble more times than they've been on the wrong, unlike the Seth Greenberg era. Now, obviously, there are different metrics used these days with the net as opposed to back then, which was the RPI, which Greenberg never understood how to work. He never understood how to game the RPI. My gut feel this year is a high seed in the NIT. That's my gut feel.
Dayton, first 4.
Oh,
Ooh, okay. An
you
11
just like
seed?
going to Dayton.
No, there's nothing there, but it's a nice arena. No, I think that's how close Virginia Tech will be on the bubble. Like I really do. I think this is it's a good team, but you're gonna have like no injuries. Everybody's gonna, it's going to have to be like that 2022 team where everybody kind of was around the team the entire time, right? Like, and I don't think that's uncommon, but like. You also can't get off to a really bad start in ACC play like you have the last 2 years. I think those first 3 games, Louisville, Wake Forest, Florida State, if you can go 3-0 or even 2-1.
Well, 2 of them are on the road. So
yeah, but if you can go 3-1 or 2-1, 3-0 or 2-1, like you give yourself a chance to do something, especially with those last 5 games. I think this team will be. I'm interested to see how the non-conference goes. I think this team will be on the bubble, has a good chance to make the NCAA tournament. Just for giggles, I'm saying they're going to the first 4 in Dayton. They get an 11 seed. They get into the tournament. They go win a game in Dayton, and then they go play in the actual first round.
Gotcha. I like that. That sounds like it would shape up to be a little bit of a nerve-wracking, but an exciting March nevertheless. Chris, thanks so much for hopping on. Looking forward to Monday and having this thing tip off, and it's already here. It's already upon us. So we're going to go ahead and step aside here on episode 325 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We're going to swap out Chris, bring on Carter Hill, and we'll bring you your women's basketball coverage ahead of Monday. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a sec. Welcome back to episode 325 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Time to start talking women's basketball. We got Carter Hill on the set, David Cunningham across the way as always. And we got to tell you first, though, that Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Check out their new Checking with Perks account. It comes with cell phone protection, roadside assistance, fuel savings, deals and discounts, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn about this great new account for students. Well, women's hoop season is upon us. Boy, it feels like just yesterday, Mr. Hill had to cancel his flight to Dallas tickets.
Texas.
He was getting ready to go watch him play in the Natty. If that ended up taking place, nevertheless, an unbelievable season last year. ACC tournament champs, #1 seed in the NCAA tournament for the first time in program history. A Final Four appearance, just unbelievable. So it's a new team with 3 similar faces and some other girls off the bench, but a lot of new faces, a lot of roster turnover here. What are fair expectations coming into the campaign for the women's basketball team? We'll start with David first.
I think the sky's kind of the limit at this point. I think winning the ACC is the goal. I think finishing in the top, I would say finishing in the top 3 of the ACC is probably realistic. I think winning it is always hard. And as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned, top 4 seed, again, being a #1 seed is hard. I expect Virginia Tech's team to be good. I expect Virginia Tech's team to peak late. I don't expect Virginia Tech to necessarily roll right out of the gate and be world beaters like a wrecking ball. But I think this will be a team that, again, hosts an NCAA tournament in Castle Coliseum, has a really, really good chance to win the ACC, if not wins the ACC, and win the ACC tournament down in Greensboro again. This is going to be a good team that wins a lot of games. As far as the NCAA tournament, I think if you can, getting to that second weekend, getting to an Elite Eight, I think getting to an Elite Eight is good, because here's why I say that. You get to an Elite Eight, you're 1 game away from a Final Four, anything can happen.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason why they can't be what they were last year. I mean, #1 seed, went to the Final Four, won the ACC, of course, down in Greensboro. Now, with that being said, it's so tough, even though they have a different group, they have the core 3 coming back, it's so tough to say Virginia Tech is going to go back to the Final Four. Because to David's point, it's a luck of a draw thing at that point. The ACC is also as loaded as ever. I mean, even next year, Stanford's going to join the conference. Think about that. So, I think there's a good chance Virginia Tech could run the table and win the ACC again. I like your point about peaking late just because of the 3 new girls to the mix and a little bit of a different rotation. But like I said, I don't think there's any reason why Virginia Tech can't be where they were last year when it's all said and done in April of 2024.
If you had to tame people's expectations a little bit, what mark could you get to and say, hey, this was still a very successful season? Maybe if it doesn't mean we're raising a national championship banner at the end, because I feel like the fan base at this point is like, oh, well, you got to the Final Four, like the next step's the national championship, and if you don't do that, like it was a failure. And I don't think that's the case. And even Kenny Brooks has said, saying that is doing a disservice to how incredibly hard it was to get there and how long it took in the first place.
I think it's just about sustaining success, really. I mean, I think that's something Kenny Brooks has done over the last few years. And yes, I mean, like I just said, it's going to be tough for Virginia Tech to get back to the Final Four, just because it's always tough to go to back-to-back Final Fours, regardless of the sport. But it's about sustaining success. Kenny Brooks has done that, and they've equipped their team to get back to the point where they can go to the Sweet 16, go to the Elite Eight, host games in Castle Coliseum in the NCAA tournament. I think a realistic expectation, and when you talk about tempering expectations, it goes back to the 3 new girls. And, of course, you have Kayla King coming back. You have Liz Kitley coming back. You have Georgia Amore coming back. But it still is a new team. Kiana Traylor's gone. Taylor Soul's gone. Deasia Gregg's gone. You bring in Matilda Eck from Michigan State, Rose Michaud from Minnesota, and Olivia Summiel from Wake Forest. And those three will, to a degree, slide into those roles. But at the same time, it's a new group. I think the Hokies are going to play a little bit differently, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. You're going to see them shoot the three ball a little bit more. And I don't think, Kenny Brooks sat in that chair right there and said they're not where they want to be defensively right now, but that doesn't mean they can't get to that point at some point this season.
This Virginia Tech team could have a higher ceiling, in my opinion, than last year's team. I think the floor is higher and the ceiling is higher. That does not mean that it starts where last year's season left off. Right. Mm-hmm. Again, like I said, I think making a Sweet 16, I don't want to say I think like making an Elite Eight. That's why I said that. Like making it. And the reason why I say making the Elite Eight would be a success, even if Tech doesn't make the Final Four or whatnot, because I think Virginia Tech will be a top 4 seed. And again, I think it's realistic. I think Tech could be a 1 seed. I wouldn't expect it. Again, only 4 teams get that, and then there's some really good teams in the country, and that's why I think Tech will be good. Top 4 are good. When the NCAA tournament committee comes around in March, I'm not sure. But what I will say is the thing that's different about women's basketball is that the top 4 seeds get to host. Mm-hmm. Virginia Tech will not lose a game in the NCAA tournament in Castle Coliseum. That means you get to the Sweet 16, you got to win 1 game, and then you're to the Elite Eight. I think that's doable, and that's why I say that. And then once you get to the Elite Eight, think about this. Virginia Tech could end up playing UConn last year. Right, it's all kind of luck of the draw, who other teams beat. I think it's very possible to make the Final Four, to even make a national championship, which is crazy to think about. I think tempering expectations, say if you can say this team's going to go to an Elite Eight, I think that's good, and then you take whatever comes from that because after that, everything else is a bonus. I think back to that Elite Eight game last year. Tech won 2 games. Tech won 2 games in Castle Coliseum, then beat Tennessee, and all of a sudden, boom, 1 game from the Final Four. That's crazy to think about. Like Carter said, I think this team is deeper. Kenny Brooks has said that. I think Tech will play more players this year, probably more than any in the Kenny Brooks era before. By that I mean maybe get to 8, probably, maybe 9. I think that's realistic. 8. Higher floor, higher ceiling. That does not mean that it starts where last year's group left off. And I think while Carter said all those things are possible, I wouldn't expect them. I would expect us to be a good team, a top 10 team. That is the expectation. Virginia Tech should be a top 10 team this year. A top 4 team, I'm not so sure. But I would expect Virginia Tech to be maybe the best team in the ACC. Again, that does not mean that this Virginia Tech team is going to come out and be world beaters, even next week when Tech goes and plays Iowa.
Let's talk personnel here. What's our starting 5 looking like going into Monday night?
It'll be Georgia Amor, of course, last year's MVP of the AC tournament and the Seattle Regional MVP. It'll be Kayla King on one wing, Matilda Eck on the other wing. She transferred from Michigan State. It'll be Rose Michaud at the 4, replacing Taylor Soul. She transferred from Minnesota. And then your 2-time, potentially 3-time AC Player of the Year, Elizabeth Kitley at the 5.
Yeah. No, that's what I would say. And Olivia Summiel is the first.
I was going to say, is she the 6th woman?
I think so, but I'm not sure. And that's something that I'm very interested to see. I would expect her to be, yes, based on her experience. But I'm not sure. That's something I'm very interested to see where Kenny Brooks goes with that. I know we'll talk more about personnel later, but there are 2 freshmen and a redshirt freshman, I think, that are all going to factor in. And Summiel has the most experience and is probably the most ready to go. But I think some of those freshmen could surprise.
Does Liz have a 3-peat in her? That's something that is incredibly, incredibly difficult to do.
Yes. If Georgia Amor does not take it from her.
Okay.
I think her biggest competition will be Georgia.
It's insane, which is a beautiful problem to have.
Particularly with Olivia Miles banged up at Notre Dame as well.
That's what I was going to say. Miles finished 2nd last year. You got to think about that. It wasn't really until March when Georgia Amor kind of went off and had this
She stole the spotlight in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. Elizabeth Kitley, I don't want to say Elizabeth Kitley was the better player in the regular season, but she was probably the more consistent player. Not to say Georgia Amore was bad, but once it got to March, Georgia shined. And Liz did too, but I think Kitley does. It kind of just depends on Amore. Like, Kitley's going to put up her same stat line. You know, she's put up 20 and 11 last couple of years. She's going to put up 20 and 11 again, if not a little bit more, based on how Tech plays. Maybe a little bit more points. But, I mean, it's going to be hard to beat out Amore. Amore is flashy, and Amore hits a lot of threes, and Amore is going to catch a lot of people's eye. So I think it'll come down to the two of them. Two other people in the conference that I would keep an eye on. Actually, I'll go three. One is Miles. Tanaya Latson from Florida State.
Yes.
She's going to be very, very good. I think Deja Kelly is somebody very, very talented from North Carolina.
Yep.
I think she's somebody that can also catch some people's eye. Olivia Miles is the other. If Olivia Miles plays, she's one of the best players in the conference, but she's coming off an injury. I'm not sure how much she'll play, if at all, this season.
You can kind of go, whew. Haley Van Lith's gone out of the conference.
Well, the Hokies got to deal with her in November.
She's at LSU, but at least she doesn't have a chance at ACC Player of the Year. Maybe SEC
Very true. Very
Player
true.
of the Year. She's going to have to battle out Angel Reese for that thing over in the SEC. So it's almost nearly impossible, because they're such different players, to say, hey, we got to go replace the production of Kayana Traylor, Taylor Soule, and Deasia Gregg, because the girls you brought in have a different style of game. You mentioned, David, that they're going to shoot the ball from beyond the arc a little bit more. But how do you do it? Because I think the loss of those three is arguably just as big as the fact that you brought the three in retention that you did bring back. I mean, those three played such a massive role night in and night out.
Sure. And the thing is, yes, it is a new team, but I can kind of go back to, we sat down with Kelly Gramlich last week at ACC Tip-Off in Charlotte, and I asked her that question. I said, how long do you think it'll take this new group to mesh? And she said with the Kenny Brooks-led squad, particularly with the experience of these three girls coming in, it probably shouldn't take as long as you would think. Now, just to temper people's expectations, I don't expect Virginia Tech to come out Monday night against High Point and be what they were in the Final Four or in the Elite Eight last year. No doubt about it. But again, they're different players. Matilda Eck, averaged 12 points a game her last 2 years in Michigan State, all Big Ten performer both years. Rose Mishaw, all Big Ten performer last year at Minnesota, 14 points a game. She's going to be able to get downhill in a similar way to Taylor Soule. Maybe the transition may be a little bit different, but I think the Hokies will be able to run a little bit as well. And Olivia Somio, we talked about her, very experienced in the ACC, has started a handful of games at Wake Forest, who's pretty solid program in the league as well. Went to the WNIT last year under a first-year head coach. So that's kind of what I would say in terms of meshing together. The good thing is those three girls have the experience. It's not going to be a 6-woman rotation this year. That's the thing. You are going to have 3 freshmen, 2 true freshmen, and a redshirt freshman most likely. But I think that will help the Hokies quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it looks very similar to last year. Rose Mishaw is very similar to Taylor Soule. Deasia Gregg, her replacement is Olivia Sumiel, and I think she's very similar to Deasia Gregg. The biggest difference is Matilda Eck to Kayana Traylor. And why I say this is when teams press Virginia Tech, that is something I'm very interested to see, because last year Tech had the luxury of using Taylor Soule to bring the ball up the floor. Even if Taylor Soule didn't bring it up and Georgia Amore was being hounded, they had Kayana Traylor. This year, they don't have that, at least yet. I'm interested to see kind of when Tech gets into a situation like that, how it works out. But in terms of style, Tech's going to probably shoot it more instead of getting downhill more. Tech's still going to have the inside presence of Mishaw and Kitley, but now you got 3 shooters on the outside. I think it's funny. I think Mishaw is the transfer that's kind of gone under the radar a little bit, but she might be the most impactful.
We've talked about the other 2 more, it feels like.
Yeah. I think Eck is the one that is going to jump right in and immediately pick up on what Tech is doing. And I think she can kind of look at Kayla King and understand exactly how Tech wants to use her. And I think that's easy. Misha kind of has to figure it out a little bit on her own, because she doesn't have somebody to kind of look at and mirror that after, if that makes sense. So, but I think Tech's style, I don't think it's going to change a whole lot. I just think that you got one more player on the perimeter that people are going to have to defend. You know, like, not that Keanu Traylor was not a good shooter, but Matilda Eck is a sharpshooter. So you go from having 3 good shooters, you know, like Keanu Traylor was a good shooter. Matilda Eck is supposed to be a great shooter. And I think that's the difference. And that's not a slight at Keanu Traylor at all. That's just how good Eck is. I think Mishaw can kind of be that X factor a little bit, because she's going to have to learn how to play off Kitley. And then Sumiel, she's the one coming in that I'm interested to see kind of where she fits, because she's going to have to play off Kitley too. I expect her to play good defense. And she's got that 3-ball in her where she can kind of pick and pop a little bit, and that's something that Deasia Gregg did a little bit,
especially in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, she got better as her career went on with it. That's something that Sumiel did really well at Wake Forest.
And to David's point as well, talking about the 3-point shooting, I go back to media day with Kenny Brooks back in October, and he mentioned something that I think, you know, perked up some eyebrows a little bit, and that's that maybe potentially the 2 best 3-point shooters on this Virginia Tech team weren't on last year's team. Kayla King and Georgia Amor are that good from deep, but Matilda Eck and Karis Baker, the true freshman, may be the best 2-point or best 3-point shooters on the team. So that's something important to note, and we'll see if that comes to light. But if that's the case, it's going to be very exciting to watch.
That definitely gets you fired up. Guys, there's a name that we really have failed to mention so far on this show, and that's Carly Wenzel. Where does she fit into this equation after redshirting a season ago and sticking around?
Former top 100 recruit. I think she's going to have a role. Gio, I think I'm interested to see it. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. And I think that's one of the pieces where we mentioned the previous 6. The other 3, it's going to be interesting to figure out where they fit in. Because Carly Wenzel, she can play point guard, but she can also play off the ball. There might be scenarios where she's in there and she's playing off the ball some. Or there might be scenarios where she's in there and Georgia Amor is playing off the ball some, which is just scary to think about. A Georgia Amor without the ball in her hand, running around off screens, kind of like a Steph Curry kind of thing. That's crazy to think about. That's possible. I think the biggest thing about Wenzel is, and I know she came on the Triumph Spotlight a couple weeks ago. I sat down and wrote a feature on her about a month ago. She is very, very skilled. I think how she earns Kenny Brooks' trust in terms of being able to hand the ball and him knowing that she's not going to make silly errors. She's still a redshirt freshman. She's never touched the floor in a college game. And as talented as she might be, same for the other 2 kids that I expect to play, they got to earn the trust. They have to show that they can play at this level, play competent basketball, and that there's not going to be a drop-off. Because, and I think of it like from a coach's perspective, if Kenny Brooks thinks that there's going to be a drop-off, why would he take Georgia Amor off the floor? And why would he put Carly Wenzel on the floor? Why would he take Elizabeth Kitley off the floor and put Clara Strack on, right? You have to know that there's not going to be a big drop-off and that the production is going to be there and that they understand what they're doing. That being said, I think Wenzel will have a big role. I'm not sure how much she's going to play. I think that will fluctuate as the season goes along. I think her figuring out, them figuring out whether she plays better as a 1 or as a 2, or if it's both and how they use that, I think that'll be very, very interesting.
Can we expect anybody else to contribute at the 5, or are we going to see Liz play 40 minutes a night here?
Clara Strack's going to play.
Yeah. And I think, too, building off of that point, potentially the 8th and the 9th women in the rotation, Karis Baker and Clara Strack. And Kenny Brooks, I know I'm building a lot off of what Coach said, but he's talked about it a lot the last few weeks. He said, now, it doesn't mean that these 2 are going to turn into those players, but Karis Baker and Clara Strack are further along their freshman year than Liz and Georgia were their freshman year. And he's gone on the record saying that on the podcast. He said it at Media Day, and he said it down in Charlotte.
Kayla in there.
Kayla in there as well. Yeah, no doubt about it. So, it's one of those things where it's, again, who knows what they're going to turn into, but the fact that they're this far along and they have your Georges, your Liz's, your Kaylas to learn from is very exciting to see for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny talked about the freshman class as a whole. just that they're farther along than and Kitley and Amor and King all admitted it too. That freshman class, the four of them, they got Mackenzie Nelson and Samaya Suffren, along with Strack and Baker, 4 top 100 kids. And everybody down there in Charlotte last week admitted, yes, that they're all farther along than that group of King and Amor and Kitley were when they first got to Virginia Tech. I'm interested to see how much Strack plays. Because, again, it's going to be a thing of, we know what Kitley can do. She's not the 2-time ACC Player of the Year for no reason, and a preseason All-American for no reason. She earned All-American honors last year. We know what Kitley can do. What does Strack do when she gets in the game? And how quickly does she pick up the way Tech plays? When I watched open practice, I believe it was last Friday, after the day after the Syracuse game, I watched open practice for about 2.5 hours. Kenny Brooks is very gracious with allowing the media to come to practice. And I saw her do a lot of great things. I also saw her make a lot of freshman mistakes. And that's going to happen. How Tech mitigates those, the kind of situations she's put in. Very interested to see. And I think the wild card here is Karis Baker. She's got the size to play the 4. She can shoot well enough to play the 3. Interested to see where she kind of fits best for Virginia Tech, but I think she's going to play a lot too. So those are the two. I think when I look at Mackenzie Nelson and Samaya Suffren, I don't know if both will redshirt. I expect at least one of them to redshirt. Maybe it's Nelson. They both kind of play point guard. Nelson is a true point guard. Suffren can play a little bit of off ball, similar to Wenzel a little bit. I don't think you need 3 or 4 point guards. It helps. Tech will have Amor and Tech will have Wenzel, and then Tech will have probably one of the other two. You don't need both of them, and I think you can probably end up redshirting one of them.
All right, let's go ahead, flip the script, talk about this schedule a little bit here. First with the non-conference for the women's basketball schedule. Well, Charlie Cream would certainly beg to differ, but I ask you guys, is it too hard? You bite off so much, and it starts with Iowa, your second bowl game of the year on a neutral site in Charlotte. Later on, you play LSU. You draw Rutgers at one point in there. I mean, doesn't ease up anywhere, to say the least.
I guess that remains to be seen, right? I mean, I think Iowa, of course, the first week of the season, this program has talked about, no, the Hokies don't necessarily want to be game planning for Caitlin Clark the first week of the year. But they just couldn't pass up the opportunity to play that team in Charlotte, a place that should be filled with maroon and orange that night and should be so good for women's basketball. They had no control over going to LSU, ACC, SEC Challenge, but I'm sure ESPN was
They
all
knew
over
exactly
that.
what they were doing.
Rutgers has been a decent program, and then the Cayman Islands tournament too. You could play some decent teams down there as well. So Kansas and Tulane. So it should be fun to watch. I do think, I don't know if they necessarily have reached the point where they're going to have to bite off more than they can chew. But I will say they're going to be tested early on. And it goes back to David's point where it goes to, maybe Virginia Tech does peak late in the season. I also think it shows how much Virginia Tech has evolved as a program for women's basketball. The fact that they get to play this Iowa game, get to go to LSU, multiple other Power 5 teams on the schedule as well, nationally televised games. It shows where the Hokies are, shows where the Hokies have built as a program. We'll see how Tech does against Iowa and LSU. There's a chance they go 0-2 in those 2 games. There's a very, very realistic chance they go 0-2 in those 2 games. But at the same time, losses in those 2 games don't necessarily hurt you. I think it can only help you in the long run.
Gio, let's not act like Houston Christian and UNC Greensboro and LIU Brooklyn and Radford are not on the schedule.
Watch out for them Sharks, though.
Yeah, true.
Well, I'm just saying the reason why Tech was dinged on the schedule was not because Iowa and LSU and the Cayman Islands tournaments were on there. It's because Rutgers is not very good. Rutgers is coming off, Rutgers has a second-year head coach. High Point is okay, and High Point will test Tech, but Houston Christian, UNC Greensboro, LIU, Radford, and William & Mary are not exactly murderer's row. So this is a schedule that has its pros and cons. Tech will know what it has after that Cayman Islands tournament and after it plays LSU. I think Tech has a good chance to go undefeated in the non-conference. Tech also has a good chance to split the Iowa LSU games or to lose both. I think it kind of just depends on how quickly this group gels. And I think I don't think the schedule is necessarily like overly tough, especially when you look at those Final Four non-conference games. LIU, Radford, Rutgers on the road. I mean, that's not going to be easy because it's a road game. But this is a Rutgers team that is a couple years removed from an actual NCAA tournament. So, and then you got William & Mary at home. Those games aren't exactly crazy. The first ACC game is Pitt. Pitt as a first-year head coach. I think you look at that schedule. It's not. It's kind of like in the middle. I would say it's got its hard points. Obviously, LSU, Iowa,
Top heavy.
yeah, and then you look at the rest, and it's kind of like a revert. Kind of like a inverted pyramid a little bit, where like tough games at the top, and then or I guess just a pyramid, and all kind of just slims out, and you've got a lot more games at the bottom. So. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking about. That was beautiful.
Media writing.
Yeah, I was imagining. I was like multiple games at the top heavy, but it's honestly like you've got LSU, Iowa in the top of the pyramid, and then that next group is the two Cayman Islands games, and it kind of just trickles down from there, and you've got a bunch of games towards the bottom. So there'll be positives and negatives. The non-conference schedule is not going to hurt them unless Tech loses one of those games it shouldn't. But the ACC is very good, and I know we'll talk about that in a second. That's why Tech does not necessarily have a tough non-conference schedule.
Yeah, there's a couple when you look at, let's do that and look at the ACC schedule here. A couple of stints that could be a little bit difficult here. There's a spot now, we don't know what the Wolfpack are going to be. You'd have to think they're going to be slightly improved from a season ago. Kind of a letdown year for NC State last season. You'll have to play NC State and Miami back-to-back. Then you get a little bit of a break, but it's on the road at Florida State. Then you play Duke and Durham. That's not an easy 4-game stretch by any means. Then a couple weeks later, you're going to have Virginia and Castle. You got to go on the road to UNC. You got to go on the road and play NC State. Get a little bit of a break with Boston College at home. But then you host Duke again, followed by Louisville, followed by your second game with Carolina, followed by Notre Dame on the road, and then you end it off with Virginia. So that back portion of the ACC schedule stands out to me.
I think it shows you how stacked the ACC is. Because February, we talk about it with the men, February's weird for the men because they only have 2 home games. February for the women, while there are patches in January where the Hokies can win some games, and of course they're going to be able to win some games the whole way, February is just a whole new level of gauntlet. UVA is going to be much improved this year. I think Coach Mox there in Charlottesville made some astronomical strides last year in year 1. So they're going to be tough. That is in Castle Coliseum. The game in Chapel Hill against North Carolina arguably was the one game Tech didn't play their best basketball in that, 13-game winning streak last year when Liz Kitley hit the buzzer beater. And Carolina in Chapel Hill, Carmichael Arena, always going to be tough, and they're going to be one of the better teams in the ACC. You mentioned NC State. That's in Raleigh. That's in Reynolds Coliseum.
You play them twice.
Yeah, well, the Wolfpack weren't exactly what they've been last year, of course, after winning multiple ACC titles in a row. But like you mentioned, there is a chance they're probably going to be closer back to what they were. But at the same time, Tech's only won in Reynolds Coliseum once in program history, and that was last year. So that's going to be tough.
Dominated last
Boston
year.
College, a little bit of a break. Duke's at home, but Kara Lawson always has her bunch ready to go. That Louisville game in the KFC Yum Center could very well follow by the Notre Dame game about a week later. Those 2 games could decide who wins the ACC regular season. Very well could.
You think Louisville's that good even without Haley Van Lith?
I don't know.
They're well coached.
They are well coached. I think particularly that Tech Notre Dame game could be in that category. North Carolina's at home, and then you finish out the regular season at UVA, and that game at JPJ is not going to be what it's been the last few years.
Yeah, that 4-game stretch towards the beginning of the schedule and then that last 7 games, especially the last handful, Tech got its hands full with the schedule, man.
It's not like the men's where we're like, wow, that last 5 games.
Yeah, no, I mean,
to try and make a little run.
I think this is a team again that has a good opportunity to win the ACC. But the reason why Tech didn't win the ACC regular season last year is because it got to late December, early January, and choked against Clemson and Miami on the road. So a lot of things are possible. There's a lot of potential, good and bad, with this schedule. Tech's going to be tested, that's for sure.
Let's do some predictions, fellas. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. David, we'll start with you. What is the final result of this season? First, give us a seed in the ACC tournament. Remember last year, they were the hottest team going in, but because of how the beginning of conference play, they were the 3 seed. But it almost had to feel like they are the best team going in, and they proved that by dismantling everybody that they faced in the ACC tournament for the most part. So give us an ACC tournament seed, and then a season finale projection. Number 1 seed in the ACC.
I think Tech wins the ACC this year, and I don't say that lightly.
That'd be another jump because that'd be a regular season championship.
Yes, I think now maybe Tech ties somebody else for it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying if it's outright or not. I think Tech will win it though, and I don't like. It's going to take some time to gel. The good news is that you have that non-conference game, and you have some easy games, and you have some hard games. You're going to be tested. You're going to know what you have, and by that I mean when Virginia Tech next week rolls out against High Point at 5:00, Kenny Brooks is going to play a different lineup and play that a different way because High Point's a different team, and is not as good as when Tech plays when Tech plays Iowa later that week, right? Those are going to be 2 separate game plans based on what the other team does. But it'd be based on how tough the other team is. You're not like you might see just about everybody play potentially against High Point. Doubt you're going to see that against Iowa.
Yes.
You might see Tech go 7 deep instead of 8 or 9 deep. And that these early challenges, Iowa, LSU, will test Virginia Tech's depth. When Virginia Tech's playing in the Spectrum Center, is Kenny Brooks going to trust Clara Strack and Karis Baker and Carly Wenzel enough to throw them out there? I don't know. We won't be able to answer that until that Thursday. Same thing when Tech goes down to Baton Rouge. But the good news is you have other opportunities in there to get those players a lot of reps, a lot of minutes. So while you continue to build the program and put the program in the spotlight, you got a lot of games on big television networks this year. You also have a couple games like Rutgers, like William & Mary, where you can get those kids reps. Some of those games might be blowouts, yeah, but they need to learn how to play basketball together because when the ACC rolls around, yeah, Tech's got Pitt and Wake Forest to open the year, and those are probably pretty easy games, or easier. It doesn't, right after that, third game of the year, it's going to get tough. So, But I think this non-conference schedule will prepare Tech well. I think Tech, Tech's not going to go undefeated or anything. There are going to be some losses in there, but I think Tech will throw some punches too. And I think Tech will throw some big punches to some really good teams. I look at that Notre Dame game in February. Who knows if Olivia Miles is going to be healthy enough to play at that point, if she's going to be available. I look at that game in Carmichael Arena. Those 2 games, that game at Louisville, those games might decide who wins the ACC. And yes, they're on the road, but I think this Virginia Tech team isn't going to shy away from anything. And I think they'll win the ACC. I feel confident, and maybe I feel a little bit. I think the one team that'll really, really challenge them is Carolina.
Yeah, okay. I think Carolina's really
Notre
good.
Dame and Louisville are kind of right there. Then it's NC State, Virginia, Duke, kind of in that realm. But North Carolina is the one to keep an eye on.
Okay.
Final 4 again this year? Or are you gonna keep it at the Elite 8?
I don't want to make a prediction on whether or not they're going to go to the Final 4 because again, it's so random. Like right. Virginia Tech could run into LSU in the Elite 8, right? Virginia Tech could or
UConn or whatever.
Yeah, like once you get to that point, you're potentially playing one of the other best teams in the country. Like Virginia Tech played Ohio State. Ohio State was a Final 4 team last year. Ohio State probably should have been in the Final 4. There wasn't enough room for them. Like that was a potential Final 4 matchup in the Elite 8. You don't know who you're going to run into there. I'm not going to make a prediction on whether they get the Final 4, but I do think they get to the Elite 8. And I think that is a good step. And then, again, once you get to the Elite 8, You just got to win one game and you're in the Final Four, win another game and you're in the national championship. That's as crazy as it sounds, it comes down to 80 minutes of basketball right there.
One game at a time. Carter, how about you?
I will also say Tech wins the ACC in the regular season for
All
the
right.
first time. My reservation came from, their run in February is one of the toughest in the ACC. And some of their draws are some of the toughest in the ACC. They don't get Notre Dame or Louisville in Blacksburg. That's tough. But Notre Dame, without Olivia Miles, maybe won't be what it could have been. Louisville has taken maybe a baby step back. However, like you mentioned, they're so well coached, you never know with them. They lose Haley Van Lith, but at the same time, they were picked 4th in the league, and they're going to give some teams a run for their money. Carolina as well, they were picked 3rd in the conference. Tech does have them in Blacksburg. They go to Chapel Hill. It goes back to that final 4-game stretch of the season. They go to Louisville, have Carolina here, go to Notre Dame, and then go to UVA. That's probably what will decide, to your point, the ACC regular season. I will go with the Hokies, although, like I said, it's a daunting stretch in February. I think Virginia Tech has the pieces to get there. With that core 3 coming back, even with meshing in new pieces, there's no reason why Virginia Tech can't get to where they were last year.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up our show today, fellas. Your final thoughts on Hokies women's basketball or men's basketball for that matter before we bring us to a conclusion.
I'm excited for both seasons, man. I think
David's been waiting for this since
Yeah,
week 2
man.
of football. He was
Well,
like, where is the hardwood?
I've been waiting for it since week 4 at least, considering Tech was 1-3 at the, in that stretch. It's gonna be busy. Like, I'm gonna be in Louisville on Saturday, and then I'm gonna turn around, come back, get basketball doubleheader on Monday. It's gonna be good. We're gonna have a ton of TSL content. I don't want to spoil anything, but I got something new. I got something new in the works that we're cooking.
Okay.
So I think
Cook it
people,
in the
I
stew.
think people enjoy it. Again, go to techsideline.com. I know this is I know audio, video, podcasts and stuff are a big part of our brand, but we put out a bunch more actual editorial content, which is where we make our big bucks. So that's where we spend a lot. That's where I spend a lot of my work, and I put a lot of time and effort into that. So yeah, go subscribe. And I think this seems gonna be really fun for me to cover, but I think as fans, both teams, the men's and the women's, they're gonna be fun to watch. Like the men, I think have a good shot to make the tournament. The women are ACC favorites. There's not I don't know what else you could want from this women's team specifically. With the men, I think they're not necessarily ACC favorites, and they were picked 8th. I think that's fair because they got a lot to prove. But I feel good about both teams going into the season, and I'm very excited to see where it goes from here. I mean, in a couple months, we'll be sitting here in January and February talking about where they are halfway through the ACC schedule, which is crazy to think about.
Might have to do another Thanksgiving tournament watch party here.
No,
I'll be down in Orlando.
Yeah, true.
I'll be
David
here.
will be in Orlando.
I'm not going home for Thanksgiving, so I'll be here. So we should do it.
Sacrifices, yeah. No,
You'll be here, right?
I'll be here a little bit. Yeah,
right.
be here a little bit.
I mean, I will be. I don't know. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. I will be at all but 4 women's basketball games this year.
He's a tank.
And 2 of those are in the Cayman Islands. So cut me some slack. I'll be in Orlando for the men instead.
Virginia Tech women's basketball is taking David Cunningham back to Piscataway, New Jersey.
Nice.
And I love Rutgers.
No home with Tony
but it's taking
Soprano
you back
and
up that way. Yeah. No, I'm excited. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And I go back to Monday's game, and I go back to Charlotte last week. It felt like Virginia Tech had that extra flair this year from a media standpoint. I think it feels like that from a fan base standpoint as well. And I think you're going to see with a doubleheader on Monday a pretty full Castle Coliseum for both games. I know Monday night's tough and maybe not the most daunting of opponents, but I think it's going to be a good crowd. Obviously, they're going to raise 2 pretty substantial banners on Monday night as well, or one. I forget how they're doing it, but 2?
It'll
Okay.
be 2. I mean, it'll be Final Four ACC Final Four one's already hanging up.
I was gonna say
it
they
is.
leaked that.
Well,
the ACC
dropped
championship.
the ball on that
the
one.
ACC championship one though.
Well, gives the fans an opportunity to see it. So it should be a whole lot of fun, and I'm very, very excited, particularly for Monday.
I hope. I tell you what. I hope those that are going to Monday night. I know it's Monday. I know it's tough to swing a doubleheader that starts at 5:00, but I don't think you want to miss the pregame stuff for the women. I mean, just honoring them with Final Four. I think they already got their rings and stuff, but they'll have a Final Four banner that's already hanging up there. They'll unveil it, an ACC championship banner. Hopefully, it's a really, really good crowd for them, and then the men tip off later at 8. So.
Awesome. Well, that wraps things up for today. And I do want to hammer home, check out the written content. Subscribe if you don't already. If all you do is listen to the podcast, you're missing out big time, because every time I read Andy, Chris, David, all of their stuff, it's unbelievable. You can learn so much. They do such a great job with that. And they make the podcast, they bring all of that knowledge into the podcast and make this that much more fun as well. Well, don't go anywhere. It's a loaded week, because we'll see you right here again tomorrow as we preview the Louisville football game. Andy Bitter will be back on set with Chris Coleman. David will be in the fourth chair. Carter, thanks for joining us. Saying so long for Nick Brown, for David Cunningham, for Carter Hill. I'm Giovanni Heater. We'll see you tomorrow. It was episode 325 of the Tech Sideline podcast.